With the rise of high-tech and healthcare industries at the dawn of the 21st century, Nashville, like other cities, is experiencing a growing population of low-income, low-skilled workers who are unable to take part in today's knowledge economy. Who are the people that make up the unskilled workforce?
If you look at the economy and the workforce that we have, there are individuals that do not have a training as far as post-secondary education. I think this includes people who dropped out high school or even have less education than that. People with limited English proficiency, and some others that don't have to have a certain skill level to obtain a job. And they can work in a warehouse job and other jobs that do not require, such as light assembly and those kind of things. So in those categories, we have what we call then low-skilled or unskilled workers.
On a normal year, we serve a little over 1,000 individuals in the adult program. Of those, about 40% are low income, roughly 400. And those are individuals who have identified as having currently been in receipt of some type of public assistance, whether it be food stamps or TANF, AFDC. Then we have another several hundred of that group that are individuals that are just low income, but not on any type of public assistance. So in a given year, a little over 1,000 people total, about 40 to 50% of them are low income.
There are many factors that contribute to the lack of training among unskilled workers. Perhaps the most severe among these is the large number of high school dropouts.
When people do not graduate from high school, we need to look at what we call educational attainment at the workplace. For example, in the current recession, when we look at unemployment rate, where, for example, in Davidson County, we have a 9.5% for the year 2009. On average. When you look at people who are high school dropouts or do not have high school diploma, the unemployment rate is almost 15%. That tells you that as we are moving into a knowledge economy, an economy that requires using technological update, an economy that will require people to be able to read and write, economy that's moving to a digital, we can see that a lot of businesses and workers, what they use is that what we call automation these days.
The plight of the unskilled worker has gradually deteriorated over the past 30 years due to a decline in manufacturing and construction, among other industries. As these jobs disappear, a void has been created between the unskilled worker and the new economy.
When we look at the way the economy is right now, in this Great Recession, or even before that, I think what we have noticed is that there was a change in the landscape of businesses in the Nashville area. Once upon a time, when we look at this in the 90s and in the 80s, we had a good factory base here that allowed people with limited skill sets to obtain jobs. As the economy has changed and we became more competitive globally, and there are changes in the technology, it eliminated the jobs that were once available for people who didn't have training.
I know that when organizations talk to employers about different jobs that they have, the employers talk a lot about the interpersonal skills. Employers say, I can train on a specific skill, but I need a certain type of person who can interact with my customer, or interact with my patient, or interact with my clients. And that's a harder skill to train over time, is those interpersonal skills.
Some of the careers that we see that individuals are trying to get away from are production and manufacturing jobs, service jobs such as fast food industry. They're looking for something that will give them a skill to separate them from the next candidate for employment. Something that they can say, I can do this skill, do it well, and deserve to be employed.
Low-income workers, without the skills needed for today's economy, face many problems on a daily basis that prevent them from pursuing career employment. The need to earn a living while furthering their education is a problem many unskilled workers face.
Many households, they would need at least to have a job, or maybe to have two jobs in order to meet the basic necessities of life. What we also notice is that the people with limited skills, who also happen to be low income, don't have the leisure to choose whether they need to pursue education or whether they need to maintain their households.
I think individuals in these days, you can find yourself in a cycle of what we call working poor, where you've got a great work ethic, you've got the soft skills you needed to go to work, you're working. A lot of times you may be working 2 jobs to make ends meet. The way to get ahead is education. It is your skill sets. Well, to do that means you have to go into a training program to receive those skills. And too often, after working 40 or 50 hours a week, or however many hours a week it is, trying to find a fit where there's an educational or training program that will work around your work schedule. There are some that are out there, but for the most part, most of your training programs are more traditionally based.
How can they attend school every day and try to work every night? How do they meet the needs of their children when they're trying to do all of that? So juggling tends to be a difficult process for the students.
In addition, the lack of transportation and daycare services are obstacles that the working poor and the unskilled must overcome if they are to obtain self-sufficiency.
I think having a reliable public transportation is essential for many low-income families to pursue education, join workforce, because they don't have their own transportation. And when someone wants to go back into training, for example, and wants to attend classes in a community college or some other place, or whether it's a GED program, and they live in a part of town that public transportation does not pass there frequently, then they would be limited the kind of education that they can pursue. Similarly, no matter what, even if there are jobs in certain parts of the county, for example, we know that most of the jobs move to the periphery in the surrounding counties. And as far as I know, there are no public transportation that leaves from the inner city and goes to those areas of town.
For people in the job market who may be working a lower end job or may be unemployed and seeking employment, one of the big barriers they face is the cost of daycare. There are daycare centers out there. However, they're very expensive, and if you're not earning a living wage or more, it's difficult to justify paying for the daycare on a weekly basis when your own pay may not cover or may just slightly exceed what the cost of daycare is. So in my opinion, daycare is one of the huge burdens that folks who are low skilled or low income may be facing as they try to improve their skills through training or to upgrade their skills to better jobs.
The cyclical certainty of economic downturns compounds the problem for the unskilled worker because they must endure longer periods of unemployment compared to those with higher levels of education. Even with economic recovery, the unskilled worker is the last to return to full-time employment.
Unusual characteristics of this recession are a very long duration of unemployment. We're currently seeing that at about 21 weeks at the national level. So the longer a person is out of work and out of the system, the environment of work, it becomes that much harder to find themselves back into that track, and again exacerbated for the low skill and the low earner.
Although the problems of the low-income and low-skilled workers are daunting, the inability to overcome circumstances that appear to be beyond their control can be mitigated through the availability of financial aid.
Financial aid can be a huge contributor to someone who is unskilled or low income in their quest to attain new skills in our community. A number of colleges, universities, and training providers provide a number of good classes, but sometimes tuition is required.
Without that assistance, they would not be able to afford their child care, their transportation, the books, tuition, uniforms. There's so much that we don't really think about that comes into play when a student enrolls in school.
Currently, there is a limited amount of funding available to attack the problems facing the unskilled worker. For Paul Haynes, the problem is not always the amount of funding that is available. He champions the strategic allocation of money and resources.
I think one of the most important things is if we get into a period of time in our economy where resources are extremely limited. Obviously, everybody can step back and say, we just need more money and we can solve the problem. Well, it's not necessarily about more money. It's about effective use of money. It's about strategies. At the Nashville Career Advancement Center, working with the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce and other organizations, worked on a study, and the study was designed to look at the labor trends and shortages in the area. The purpose of that, from our vantage point, is where are those jobs going? What jobs are leaving, what jobs are going, what are the skill sets that are necessary? We have limited amount of funding, and it's to target that your investments to where at the end of any skill development or any training, there's a job at the end of it.
Ultimately, it is through education and the resources needed to educate that the unskilled worker will gain knowledge in the knowledge economy.
I think the most important thing for any low-income or low-skilled individual coming into the workforce needs is education and skill development. The basic part of that is at least a high school diploma at a minimum. They need to have some level of education or training beyond that, not necessarily traditional post-secondary education, but they do need to have skills such as a certification that's industry recognized, whether that's an ASE certification for automotive technicians or whether it's one in the home building industry or maintenance industry or even computer technology industry. Without the skills they need, it becomes very difficult to start to engage in the workforce. So that basic need is addressing the educational skill shortage.
There's a real imperative for our region to invest in education and training so that we are that competitive workforce and that region that is fully competitive in a global environment in the years ahead. So our investment in an educational system is greatly important because as well those workers that currently are merely competitive, for them to be fully competitive in a changed environment will have to have a much greater awareness of those changes coming forward. What are the occupations that will appear on the horizon that may not even be there yet? Those that they and their family and generations back have sought out may be jobs that no longer exist. So how did they get those skills? And how do we as a community and region invest in those types of training opportunities for them so that they can be as competitive as they'd like to be and that we all as a region would hope they would be?
In place of the low-paying job, I can have a high-paying job. In place of a manufacturing or production job, I can have a high-skilled job. Instead of a job where I just take what I can get, I go into a high-growth, high-demand industry. The difference is between a job and a career.
Generational poverty exists, and one of the ways to break the cycle of generational poverty is through education. Is that first person in the family to graduate high school, or that first individual in the family to graduate from college. Those are the things that start to break the cycle of poverty, and I think that's something that the city is well under its way to do, and I think that's something that needs to continue to do. As we look at it as workforce development professional, we can track the income of an individual, the unemployment rates of an individual. All of those are directly connected back to the skills and the education level of the person. So I think that's one thing we really need to continue as a community to embrace is education reforms and improvement in education.